Hello friends, how are you? Hope you are doing well. So today we are starting with a new topic of environmental management system and its requirements. So let us understand the environmental management system, which is nothing but an ISO 14001 standard, and the latest edition is of 2015. So according to this, there are certain requirements which we need to discuss how successfully or effectively we can implement the ISO 14001 or environmental management system within the organization or within the business. So that we need to understand first, and that's how we can proceed for successful or effective implementation of ISO 14001. So what are the requirements of ISO 14001 or environmental management system? Let us start with the understanding of the organization and its context. First of all, we need to understand that the organizations shall determine what exactly the external and internal issues and which are relevant to its purpose and that affects its ability to achieve the intended outcomes of the environmental management system. So such issues shall include environmental conditions being affected by or capable of affecting the organization. So what can be those external and internal issues? Internal issues, like we can think about strategy, leadership, structures, performance indicators, communication, cultural issues. Then we talk about the external issues like legal requirements, the changes, the planned changes, technical developments, market analysis, competition, supply chain, ecological environment, neighborhood, and the public interest. So when you are working in any organization and you want to audit any organization's environmental management system and you want to ask certain questions to auditees regarding the uh, understanding of the organization and its context. So you can ask certain questions like, has the organization identified the external and internal issues? Has that organization identified the ability to achieve the intended outcomes of the environmental management system? So there are two main questions related to this particular concept of the organization and its context. So we can think about the internal and external issues which can impact the business as well as the environment as well. Okay, the environment, the surroundings. And the second question is, has that organization identified the external and internal issues which have ability to achieve the intended outcomes of the environmental management system? Next is about, we need to understand the needs and expectations of the interested parties. So first of all, we need to identify what those interested parties are. So the interested parties, like you can say the clients, the owners, the authorities, the employees, the neighbors, the associations, the general public, banks, insurers, suppliers, partners, and universities as an examples. So we can think about the organization shall determine the interested parties that are relevant to the environmental management system and their relevant needs and expectations, means their requirements of these interested parties, and which of these needs and expectations become its compliance obligation. So we need to identify their requirements, and let's say suppose we talk about the authorities. So there are certain requirements from authorities which can become the compliance obligations. So when an auditor is coming to you and asking the questions related to the needs and expectations of the interested parties, he can ask you that who are the interested parties relevant to the environmental management system and how they have been identified in the organization, where the needs and expectations of these interested parties are being maintained, and which of these needs and expectations it chooses to accept, and so they become part of the compliance obligations. Next is about determining the scope of the environmental management system. So first of all, we need to ensure that the organization has determined the boundaries, the scopes, the applicability of the environmental management system. So for the scope to define or determine the scope, the organization shall consider the external and internal issues, the compliance obligations, the organizational functions, operations, units, their physical boundaries, activities, products and services of the organization, and its authority and ability to exercise the control and influence. So once the scope is defined, all the activities, products and services of the organization within the scope need to be included in the environmental management system. So the scope shall be maintained as a documented information and must be available to the interested parties as well. Must be available to the interested party. So we can think about certain compliance verifications related to the scope of the environmental management system, where we talk about some relevant evidences like commercial registers, procedural landscapes, process models, organization charts. We can think about the process descriptions and procedures, applicable documents, environmental management manuals, geographical and technical scopes, reason for exclusion of the certain requirements. And we can think about the company websites, their environmental reports, the annual reports, the sustainability reports, description of the outsourced processes. So when you ask any questions to the auditees related to the scope of the environmental management system, so you can ask a question like, has that organization determined the scope and boundaries of the EMS consideration or environmental management system considering? So what we need to consider, as I said earlier, external and internal issues, compliance obligations, organizations, operations, functions, business units, physical boundaries, its activities, products and services, its organization's authorities and ability to exercise the control and influence, and scope shall be maintained in the documented information actually. And is that scope well communicated to the interested parties, or that scope is available with the interested parties? So these sort of questions you can ask when you are conducting any EMS audit considering the scope of the environmental management system. Next is about to achieve the intended outcomes of the environmental management system, including enhancing the environmental performance of the organization. The organization shall have established, implement, maintain and continually improve an environmental management system, including the processes needed and their interactions in accordance with the requirements of the international standards. So for this to ensure, the organization shall consider the knowledge gained when establishing, maintaining the environmental management system. So certain documents as an auditor you can verify related to the environmental management system, like for an example, diagrams of the interactions of the processes, or you can think about the process models, input, process, output diagrams, list of the process owners, their job descriptions, roles. We can talk about the performance indicators for the measuring the effectiveness of the processes, assignment of the performance indicators, measurement, monitoring and assessment of the processes, linkage of the processes with the procedures, work instructions, available resources. Then we can think about the analysis of the processes with regards to the, most importantly, risk and opportunities, and the associated planning, implementation and assessment measures. And finally, we can think about certain evidences like list of the documents necessary for carrying out the processes and for their controls and safeguarding actually. So for ensuring the intended outcome of the environmental management system, there are certain examples of the key performance indicators which you can verify, like performance indicators for the process performance, process indicators for the process costs, for resources and its uses, and the process indicators or performance indicators for achieving the goals. So to ensure the effective or intended outcomes of the environmental management system, certain questions which you can ask to the auditees, like for an example, are all the documents related to the processes needed for environmental management system have been identified first of all, and their interactions with the processes also defined very well, and is there any evidence available which you can verify to ensure the continual improvement in the organization. Next is what we are talking about, the leadership and commitment. So the top management shall demonstrate the leadership and commitment with respect to the environmental management system, where we can think about taking the accountabilities for the environmental management system's effectiveness, ensuring the environmental policy, environmental objectives, goals are established, ensuring the integration of the environmental management system requirements with the business processes, business functions, the products, services, and the activities. And then we talk about the ensuring the resources needed for the environmental management system. We need to ensure those resources are available or not. Communicating the importance of the effective environmental management system, let the people understand the benefits, significance of the effective implementation of the environmental management system. The people shall understand in the organization and they shall ensure that the environmental management system achieves its intended outcome. So for that, directing and supporting the people to contribute for effectiveness of the environmental management system, promoting the continual improvement, and we need to define the relevant management roles to demonstrate their real leadership as it applies to their area of responsibility. So for this particular section, to ensure as an auditor what we can ensure in the organization, we can verify certain documents or evidences like management reviews, the meeting minutes, performance charts, environmental objectives, environmental policy and its communication, action plans, reports from the environmental representatives, employee informations like notices, agenda of information, events, and we can talk about the employee development plan, their recruitment plan, the performance reviews, feedback sessions related to the environmental management system. So, some more documents which you can verify like records regarding the targets, project plans, investment plans, company agreements, continual improvement projects, results of the management meetings. We can think about the company guidelines. So there are certain parameters which you can look into to understand how effectively the organization is on track with respect to the KPIs. So extent of achievement of the environmental objectives, qualifications of the staffs, amount and utilization of the training budgets, level of the planned investments and their implementations related to the environmental management systems. So most importantly, the employees and the stakeholders satisfaction also, it's very important for us. Then how to ensure that the top management demonstrated leadership and commitment has been effectively implemented, or it's effectively demonstrated in terms of leadership and commitment. So there are certain questions as an auditor you can ask, like whether the accountability for the different management personnel or the staff or team members have been considered for effectiveness of the EMS. Then establishing that policy objectives which can be compatible with the strategic directions and the context of the organization, ensuring the integration of the EMS requirements into the business processes, ensuring the resources needed for EMS are available or not, and communicating the importance of the effective environmental management and confirming the EMS requirements. So ensuring the EMS achieves its intended outcomes. Then we can think about directing and supporting the personnel to contribute to the EMS, effectiveness of EMS, and promoting the continual improvement within the organizations. So for that, supporting the relevant management system roles to demonstrate their leadership as it applies to their area of responsibility or to the area of responsibility of the management. So thank you friends for now. We will continue our discussion from the next set of discussion. Thank you.